Imagine waking up to a life of complete darkness. No sunrise over towering pines, no eagles soaring overhead, only the silence of a world forever changed. After a devastating accident stole his sight, Thomas lost more than his vision. He lost himself, until a wounded bobcat named Luna entered his life. Their quiet companionship soon morphed into something no one could have predicted. What if a blind man could learn to see through the eyes of a predator? Veterinarians said it was impossible, and experts called it madness. But could a blind man truly walk with a wild animal by his side? What happens next will leave you speechless. Before we start, hit the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. The world before was a symphony of light and shadow, a masterpiece painted in the vibrant hues of the Oregon wilderness. Thomas Callahan had lived his life by the sun's rise and fall, a park ranger whose cathedral was the towering Douglas firs of Silverwood National Forest, and whose scripture was written in the tracks of deer and elk. His eyes, the color of a summer sky, had been his most trusted tools, capable of spotting a hawk on a thermal a mile away, or discerning the subtle shift in a leaf that signaled the coming of autumn. He was a man carved from the very landscape he protected. Quiet, self-reliant, and at peace in his solitude. His small cabin sat nestled at the edge of the forest, a place where the silence was broken only by the chatter of jays and the whisper of wind through pine needles. It had been lonelier since Martha passed 5 years ago, the silence sometimes growing loud enough to echo the hollow space in his chest. To fill those hours, he began volunteering at the Silverwood Wildlife Sanctuary, a sprawling haven for injured and orphaned animals just a few miles from his home. It was there, in a quarantined enclosure at the far end of the sanctuary, that he first saw her. She was a storm of terrified energy, a blur of tawny, spotted fur and feral green-gold eyes. A young bobcat, barely more than a kitten. Her back leg was mangled and raw from the rusted jaws of a poacher's trap. Found her just in time, Eleanor Vance, the sanctuary's director, had said, her voice a low murmur beside him. Eleanor was a woman in her late 60s, with practical hands and a gaze that held both the weariness of seeing too much cruelty and the unwavering resolve to combat it. Another few hours and the infection would have been irreversible. We've set the bone, but the trauma, that's a different kind of wound. She's still half wild, Thomas. Don't get too close. Thomas ignored the warning, or rather, he heard it, but felt a pull that was stronger than caution. He saw past the bared teeth and the low, guttural hiss. In those frantic, golden eyes, he saw a reflection of a pain he understood, the terror of being trapped, the rage against a fate you didn't choose. He saw a profound and terrifying loneliness. He named her Luna, for the way her eyes seemed to capture the moonlight, even in the bright of day. Every afternoon, after his shift, Thomas would pull up a simple wooden stool just outside her enclosure. He wouldn't try to touch her or even speak to her much at first. He would simply sit, a silent, steady presence. After a week, he began to read aloud. He read from worn paperbacks of Jack London and Walt Whitman, his voice a calm, even baritone that carried no threat. He read of vast, open spaces, of wild things that ran free under an endless sky. Slowly, miraculously, the storm inside Luna began to quiet. The hissing softened. She would stop her frantic pacing and watch him, her tufted ears twitching at the rhythm of his words. One day, she limped to the edge of the enclosure, lay down with her paws tucked beneath her, and listened, her gaze locked on his. It was a truce, an offering of trust so fragile he barely dared to breathe. Something deep inside him, a place that had felt dormant since Martha's passing, stirred with a warmth he had forgotten. Then, the world went dark. It was a Tuesday in October. A logging truck, its brakes failing on a steep, rain-slicked grade, had crossed the center line. Thomas remembered the sickening screech of tires, the impossible horn blast that seemed to last an eternity, and then a shattering, crystalline explosion as the world dissolved into a vortex of impact and blinding white light. He awoke to a muffled beeping and the sterile scent of antiseptic. The light was gone, replaced by a thick, impenetrable blackness. It wasn't the comforting dark of his cabin at midnight. It was an aggressive, absolute void. Panic, cold and sharp, clawed at his throat. He reached out, his hands finding only crisp hospital sheets. The doctor's words were gentle but final. The impact caused severe trauma to both optic nerves, Thomas. We did everything we could. I'm so sorry. The symphony of his life had gone silent. The masterpiece was erased. His world was now a prison of 4 walls he could not see. A map of familiar objects that had become treacherous obstacles. The independence that had defined him was stripped away, layer by painful layer. Making coffee was a minefield of potential burns. Finding a matching pair of socks was a Herculean task. The forest he loved, once a source of solace, was now a place of terrifying disorientation. His career was over. His life, as he knew it, was over. He was blind and utterly, crushingly alone. Eleanor visited him in the hospital and again when he returned to his cabin, a place that now felt alien and hostile. He was brittle, a ghost haunting the halls of his own life. "How are you, Thomas?" she asked softly one afternoon, her voice thick with concern. "I'm learning to count my steps to the bathroom," he said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. "That's how I am." "The sanctuary misses you," she said. "Luna. She's been looking for you. She paces at the time you used to arrive." A flicker of something, a ghost of the old warmth, passed through him. Luna. The wild, broken thing that he had tried to soothe. Now he was the broken one. "I can't," he whispered, the words catching in his throat. "I can't even navigate my own home, Eleanor. How can I go anywhere else?" "Let me drive you," she insisted. "Just once, just to sit." He resisted, but Eleanor was persistent. A few days later, he found himself being led by the arm toward Luna's enclosure. The familiar sense of pine and damp earth filled his senses, sharper now, more defined. He heard the rustle of animals in nearby pens, the distant call of a crow. He stood where he always had, his new white cane a clumsy foreign object in his hand. "Luna?" he called out, his voice uncertain. He heard a soft chuff, a sound she made that was somewhere between a purr and a cough. He heard the faint scrape of her claws on the concrete floor as she moved closer. He reached a trembling hand toward the chain-link fence. He felt a tentative, wet nose press against his fingers, followed by the surprising rasp of her tongue. Her whiskers, coarse and sensitive, tickled his skin. He sank to his knees, his other hand gripping the fence to steady himself. Tears he hadn't allowed himself to shed streamed down his face, hot and silent. In that moment, The chasm of his loneliness didn't feel quite so infinite. She couldn't see his tears, and he couldn't see her eyes, but their shared darkness created a bridge between them. He, the man who had lost his world of light. She, the creature who might never know a world beyond a cage. They were two prisoners, comforting each other through the bars. That visit became the first crack of light in his suffocating darkness. It was the beginning of an idea so audacious, so utterly unprecedented, that when he first voiced it to Eleanor, she stared at him as if he'd lost his mind. "You want to do what?" she'd asked, her voice incredulous. "Train her," Thomas said, his voice gaining a sliver of its old conviction. "Not as a pet, as a partner, as my eyes." "Thomas, for God's sake, she's a bobcat. She's a predator. We have professional trainers here, and even they say she can never be fully domesticated. It's not a golden retriever. This has never, ever been done." "Has anyone ever tried?" he countered. "Has anyone ever spent months building the kind of trust I have with her? She's intelligent, Eleanor. I know she is. She learned to listen to my voice. She learned my schedule. She can learn more. We can learn together." He was relentless. He argued that Luna could never be released into the wild. Her leg hadn't healed perfectly, leaving her with a slight limp that would make hunting difficult. She was destined for a life in an enclosure. This, he argued, was a different kind of freedom for both of them. Eleanor, seeing the first spark of life in his eyes in months, finally, hesitantly, agreed to a trial. She brought in Dr. Anya Sharma, the sanctuary's top animal behaviorist, a sharp, skeptical woman who viewed the project with deep professional misgivings. The foundation of any service animal relationship is predictability and an innate desire to please a human handler, Dr. Sharma explained, her tone clinical. Bobcats possess neither of these traits. Their instincts are driven by survival, territory, and prey drive. This is a fascinating but likely futile experiment. The training was a painstaking process of trial and error, a slow, meticulous dance of building a new language. They started inside Luna's enclosure. Thomas would tap his cane, and Anya would use a clicker and a small piece of chicken to reward Luna for approaching the sound. They taught her to associate a soft command. Up, with placing her paws on his shoulder, a position from which she could see what was directly in front of him. They taught her wait, left, and right. There were countless setbacks, days when Luna's wild instincts flared, and she would ignore him completely, batting at a beetle on the floor. Days when Thomas's frustration boiled over, and he would slump in defeat, the darkness pressing in on him again. But Dr. Sharma, her skepticism slowly melting into fascination, urged him on. "Watch her ears, Thomas," she'd say, even though he couldn't. "I'll tell you what they're doing. They're constantly swiveling, picking up sounds you and I can't hear. Her sense of smell is 1,000 times better than ours. She's not learning to be a dog. You're learning to trust a bobcat's senses." The breakthrough came with a low-hanging branch. They were practicing in a larger wooded enclosure on the sanctuary grounds. Thomas, following Luna's lead, was walking a familiar path. Suddenly, Luna stopped dead. She didn't move. "What is it?" Thomas asked. "There's a branch ahead," Anya said, her voice hushed. "About chest height for you." Thomas waited. He felt a gentle, insistent pressure from Luna's head against his right knee. It wasn't a command they had taught. It was improvisation. It was communication. He took a step to the right, and his hand brushed past the leaves of the branch. "Good girl, Luna," he whispered, his heart soaring. Good girl. After a year of intensive daily work, Dr. Sharma signed off, her report filled with caveats and wonders. While she will never be a conventional service animal, she wrote, the symbiotic relationship developed between Thomas Callahan and the Bobcat Luna is a remarkable case of interspecies communication and trust. Caution is paramount. The sanctuary, after a lengthy board meeting and the signing of a mountain of liability waivers, officially adopted Luna to Thomas. The day he walked out of the sanctuary gates with her leash in his hand and her steady weight in a specially designed harness on his shoulder was the first day of his new life. Their first real test was the local grocery store. The automatic door slid open with a hiss, and a cacophony of sounds and smells assaulted Thomas. The rumble of shopping carts, the tinny music from overhead speakers, the competing scents of bleach, baking bread, and rotisserie chicken. He felt the muscles in Luna's shoulders tense. He took a deep breath, his white cane tapping a steady rhythm on the polished linoleum. Tap, tap, tap. Easy, girl. We're okay, he murmured. Luna, perched on his shoulder, guided him with subtle shifts in her weight. A low, almost inaudible rumble in her throat warned him of a pyramid of canned peaches stacked precariously at the end of an aisle. She was magnificent. He felt a surge of pride so fierce it almost brought him to his knees. Then, it happened. A small child, escaping his mother's grasp, came tearing around the corner, his sneakers squeaking on the floor. He stopped short, his eyes wide with wonder. "Kitty!" he shrieked, pointing a chubby finger. The sudden noise and movement startled Luna. She wasn't a kitty. She was a bobcat. In a flash of pure instinct, she leaped from Thomas's shoulder, her leash pulling taut in his hand. Her body was coiled, a low growl vibrating from her chest. Panic, hot and acidic, spiked through Thomas. The child's mother screamed. The clatter of a dropped jar echoed through the aisle. He heard gasped whispers, the buzzing of disapproval from the shelves around him. "Is that a wild animal? He shouldn't have that in here. It's dangerous." He struggled to regain his grip, his heart hammering against his ribs. For a terrifying moment, he thought Eleanor and Anya were right. He'd made a terrible, arrogant mistake. This was a wild animal, and he had brought her into a world she didn't understand. "Luna, back," he commanded, his voice shaking but firm. He pulled gently on the leash. "Luna, here, to me." He poured every ounce of the trust they had built into his voice. He spoke softly, repeating the calming phrases from their earliest days at the sanctuary. He heard her growl subside, replaced by a confused whine. She took a tentative step back toward him. He knelt, fumbling in the chaos, and she pressed her head against his chest, trembling. He stood up, his own legs shaking, and somehow managed to get her back into her harness. He abandoned his shopping cart, turned, and made his way toward the exit, the whispers of fear and judgment following him like a physical force. He felt the burn of 100 unseen, disapproving eyes. Outside, in the cool air, he sank onto a bench, his head in his hands, Luna a warm, heavy weight on his lap. He hadn't just failed. He had terrified people, and worse, he had terrified her. The fragile confidence they had built felt shattered. Their real trial, the crucible that would either forge their bond into something unbreakable or shatter it forever, came with the sky. It was a late summer evening, the air thick and heavy with unspoken promises of a storm. Thomas and Luna had established a routine, a quiet rhythm to their days. Their walks through the small town of Silverwood were still met with a mixture of apprehension and growing curiosity. But the raw fear of that first day had subsided. Mr. Henderson, the baker, would often leave a small, unsalted piece of jerky on his windowsill for Luna. The town librarian had designated a quiet corner near a sunny window for them, where Thomas would listen to audiobooks while Luna napped at his feet. They were becoming a part of the town's fabric, a strange and wonderful thread. But that evening, the world felt different. Thomas, with his heightened senses, could feel the barometric pressure drop. The air grew still and electric. The birds fell silent. "Storm's coming, Lou," he murmured, stroking the soft fur behind her tufted ears as they sat on their porch. He felt a deep, low tremor run through her body. When the first rumble of thunder echoed in the distant mountains, Luna went rigid. Her wild blood, the ancient instincts passed down through generations of ancestors who knew the terror of a sky at war, took over. Her fear was a palpable thing, a scent like ozone and panic. The storm rolled in fast and violent. The sky, which Thomas could only imagine, was apparently split open by a jagged fork of lightning, followed an instant later by a crack of thunder so loud it shook the very foundations of the cabin. It was too much for her. With a strangled cry, a sound of pure primal terror, Luna ripped the leash from Thomas's hand. He felt the nylon slide like fire through his palm, and then she was gone. A phantom of fur and fear swallowed by the roaring darkness. "Luna!" he screamed, his voice lost in the deluge of rain that suddenly sheeted down. "Luna!" He scrambled for the door, his cane clattering uselessly to the floor. He didn't need it. He didn't need anything but her. He stumbled out into the storm, calling her name until his voice was raw and cracked. The rain plastered his hair to his skull and soaked his clothes in seconds. He was blind in a world that had turned into a chaotic nightmare of sound and fury. Every crash of thunder felt like a blow to his heart. Every drop of rain felt like a nail. He had brought her into his world, made her dependent on him, and now he had lost her to the very wildness he thought they had conquered together. Visions, more vivid than anything he had seen since the accident, filled his mind. Luna, terrified and alone, her leg injured, caught in another trap or struck by a car on the slick road. He searched for hours, a desperate, stumbling figure calling into the maelstrom. He tripped over roots he knew were there. He walked into trees, his hands and face becoming scratched and bruised. He was a blind man searching for his eyes in a hurricane. The despair was a physical weight, crushing the air from his lungs. He had never felt so helpless, not even in the hospital bed when they told him he would never see again. This was worse. This was a loss of the soul. Defeated, heartbroken, and shaking from cold and grief, he eventually found his way back to the road, and by some miracle of memory and touch, followed it to the gates of the sanctuary. He collapsed against the cold, wet metal, his calls for Luna now just ragged sobs. He had lost her. He had lost everything. The only being in the universe who truly understood his darkness was gone, consumed by a greater darkness. He must have stayed there for hours, slumped against the gate as the storm slowly rumbled its way east. The rain softened to a drizzle, and a pale, watery gray began to seep into the black sky. Dawn was breaking. And then he heard it. A soft, hesitant mew. His head snapped up. It was so faint he thought he had imagined it. "Luna," he whispered, his voice a broken croak. He felt a delicate brush against his outstretched fingers through the bars of the gate. Whiskers. He lurched forward, his hands finding a small, soaked, trembling body. It was her. She was caked in mud and shivering violently, but she was whole. He fumbled with the latch on the gate, a familiar task from his volunteer days, and swung it open. He knelt on the wet ground and wrapped his arms around her. She didn't struggle. She burrowed into his chest, nuzzling him with a fierce, desperate intensity, making that soft, chuffing sound over and over, as if to say, "I'm here. I was scared, but I came back. I trust you." He held her, rocking back and forth in the gray light of the new day, his tears mingling with the rain in her fur. The storm had passed, both outside and within him. She had been terrified, had run from the thunder, but she had not run back to the wild forest. She had run to the only other home she had ever known, the place she associated with him. She had come back for him. From that day on, something shifted. Their bond, tested by public scorn and elemental terror, was now forged in something stronger than steel. When they returned to their walks through town, there was a new confidence in their steps. The story of the storm and the blind man's frantic search had spread through the town like wildfire. The whispers of disapproval were replaced by murmurs of awe. People didn't see a dangerous animal anymore. They saw a miracle of devotion. They saw family. Mrs. Gable from the grocery store, who had been the first to gasp in fear, stopped him on the street one day. "Thomas," she said, her voice soft, "I was wrong. To see that kind of loyalty, it's a beautiful thing." Shoppers would now pause to marvel at the unlikely pair. They saw how Luna would press her nose to the ground to sniff out a patch of ice in winter, or pat ahead to navigate a tricky curb, her body a seamless extension of his own senses. Thomas, in turn, would murmur constant words of praise and encouragement, his hand resting gently on her back. Together, they moved through the world, a silent testament to the fact that the deepest connections are not bound by species or circumstance. They were a blind man and his bobcat guide, a curiosity that kindled a little bit of wonder in everyone who saw them, reminding them that family can be found in the most unexpected places, and that light can be found in the most profound darkness. At sunset, they would sit on the bench outside the Silverwood Sanctuary, the place where it had all begun. Thomas would stroke Luna's soft fur, feeling the steady, rhythmic beat of her heart against his leg. He could no longer see the sun painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, but he could feel its warmth on his face. Luna, her wild, golden eyes no longer filled with fear, would gaze at the horizon he could not see, her body relaxed and content against his. Neither darkness nor fear could hold them anymore. They had been broken, and they had healed each other. They had learned to see not with their eyes, but with their hearts. And that light, more brilliant than any sun, would carry them forward, side by side, forever.